Hey guys, Niall here on behalf of Glacier Productions. Today we're going to make a quick blog post about what kind of softwares we used and why we used them. We think this is important to look at because none of us has actually used any of the softwares apart from a tiny bit of Photoshop experience. So, it was interesting trying to learn as well as do. I think we put it off quite well, but I just want to kind of show you guys kind of how we did it and what we did. So, let's start with the first one. Okay, so the first software that we're going to be looking at that we used is called Premiere Pro, and it's the one we used for the majority of the editing, as well as the transition work and the color correction. This was kind of the first thing that we sort of used. Yeah, I'd say this was probably one of the first things we used with regards to the video editing side of things. So just going to give you a quick kind of rundown of the stuff we learned about this. So here you have all your clips. So for this person, this is just a screenshot that I found on the internet. They just have the sequence 1. So what you do is you can also find your media down here. So you basically click and drag onto this, which is the timeline, and that allows you to cut and drag and replace everything, put it in different layers, anything you want really. Up in the top here we have the two viewports. You can have, usually you have one for kind of sampling your media and one for your finished product. So that's what we usually ran with, because you add one for sampling it, and then you'd kind of trim it with this timeline, and then whatever's in that timeline, when you click and drag, you would drag it over to the final or onto the timeline. So we use that mostly. We also use some effect controls, which you can see is this tab here. We use that to add sort of fade-ins, fade-outs, slows, stuff like that. Also some stabilization, because one shot which we used for our title was slightly shaky, so we had to stabilize that. So this is pretty much like we use a lot of basic stuff in Pro. We didn't really go too deep into it. Really, it was just arranging kind of click and drag stuff in this timeline. So now we're going to go on to another piece of software that we used. So now we're going over to Photoshop, which is also part of the Adobe package. I believe all of the software we used, apart from one maybe, was part of the Adobe package, because it kind of made it easier to kind of relate all the projects together. So things we use Photoshop for. We used it for a few of the photos on the blog, but the main reason is we used it to create our logo, which you can see on the screen now. We used somewhat basic ideas. It was literally a copy-paste of the iceberg or the glacier, and then we used the polygon tool or the polygon lasso tool to kind of go around and cut it out. Then we put that onto a black background with a circle over it. Then we rasterized the circle and basically put another circle within that circle. Then made the center transparent, put the word glacier on, and that was pretty much it. It was obviously we faded out the bottom of the glacier to make it kind of look like it fit in more, rather than we just like slapped it in the middle. So Photoshop we used probably the least, I'd say. However, I thought it was worth a mention because we hadn't all used Photoshop before, so it's quite an interesting thing for us to kind of try with and learn. So here obviously is where you'd edit your picture. They have some sunflowers. This is your toolbar here. Like I say, we used the lasso tool most, obviously the selection tool, and we also used kind of a soft-edged eraser to get rid of the sharpness of the image. So now we're going to move on to the next piece of software. So now we're going to move on to what I consider my favourite piece of the editing software. So what my favourite program to use was, and probably the one that I personally spent most time using, is Adobe After Effects. Again, part of the After Effects package. So this was used for us. We used it for the titles, because obviously we had kinetic topography, so we needed to have something more versatile than just put the word on the screen. So we went straight into After Effects. I don't think we used it for anything else. I think it was just the titles, but because we had kind of semi-complicated titles and a lot going on, we had to use After Effects. We also used the rotoscoping tool, which is this guy here, to kind of lift our character from the scene so we could have the text behind him. That's how we did that. So here we have the layers. So for example, we had our base layer, then we had our text layer, and then we had the rotoscope layer on top. So it's like a sandwich with the text in the middle. This is like your effect controls. So when I wanted to make the text go slightly opaque, slightly transparent, I used a slider in here. This is similar to the effects panels in Premiere Pro, where you would slide to do color correction and stuff like that. So while we didn't use this as much as the others, this was probably the second most used, just because the stuff we were doing was quite complicated for our first time of using it. So we spent actually a lot of time in this software. So definitely worth a mention, I think. And now we're going to head over to our last piece of software, which we used for our production. Okay, so this is the final piece of software that we kind of majorly used, and it's called Logic. This was used for the audio, because all the audio you hear in our movie is either, you know, recorded on site or music that we had to make ourselves. So this was there was a long time spent in this because it was quite a long process of making audio, but it was probably the second least used. However, we still spent quite a while on it, so we wanted to mention it. So the thing we used most were the loops tab, which you can see here. What that would do is bring up a list of pre-recorded loops and audio kind of bits, and then you just drag them onto the timeline, as well as using the library, which had a list of instruments, and you select an instrument, and then your keyboard would become the notes of that instrument. So, for example, when Callum was making the music you hear right at the beginning, he was actually playing the bass line along to fit with the rest of the music. So he spent a lot of time doing that. Generally, it was quite easy. You'd throw a loop on, find other loops that match that very well, throw them on. However, especially the kind of ending music was kind of difficult to set up because we needed to get a correct tone for it. However, I think in the end we got quite a successful product because of this. So here you can see all the different clips. Like I said, this is where the clips would be, and this is the volume levels. We didn't really mess around with these too much. We kind of just, like I say, just drag them on, play our own music with our keyboard, and kind of go from there. So that's the last software that we used. I'd like to thank you for watching this. Just a little video explaining that, what kind of softwares we used, how we used them, and kind of what level we went into them with. Thanks for watching.